Good evening, everyone. This is Mike Romali here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for September 26, 2022, around 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot to talk about this evening, including Hurricane Ian now barreling towards Cuba and a significant threat for portions of the western Florida Peninsula over the next several days from the storm. So let's go and jump straight into everything. Taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this evening as the sun begins to set, we have Hurricane Ian now on its final approach to the western tip of Cuba at this point. This is moving off towards the north-northwest and then will cross into the Gulf sometime tomorrow afternoon as it begins its final approach towards the Florida Peninsula. If we take a look here at the visible satellite imagery this evening as the sun sets, we notice that the storm today has been fluctuating with intensity because we've had some dry air intrusions into the circulation, and overall it's kind of just been a very weird shaped system. We notice a deep convective burst going on towards the end of this satellite loop, though, the visible satellite loop that is. And so we notice that we should have a circulation that is beginning to finally become more symmetric this evening. If we look here at the GPM data here, this is looking, basically what we're looking at here is the satellite-derived rain and kind of the cloud motion in here. And so this is the microwave satellite imagery, and we notice that there is a partially opened eye wall to the north here. So our center of circulation is somewhere in here, and we have a partially open eye wall to the north, and the strongest band is off towards the northeast here, where recon is sampling some pretty high winds right now, and the pressure has steadily dropped. We are in the 960s, and indeed we have a new pass that came in around 966 there. So we're still dealing with much of the same here. We notice that again, this is moving kind of north-northwest like this. And so this is heading towards the western part of Cuba at this point and will continue doing so for the next several hours. When we look at the recon plane, this is the NOAA reconnaissance mission that is currently investigating the system. Their first pass through, you can kind of see that northwest to southeast pass here, did notice that the overall structure of the storm is becoming a little bit more symmetric today. We noticed that there is a mostly closed eye wall, it seems here. However, again, some of these convective reflectivities are lacking a little bit. You notice that, again, there's kind of this partially open segment to the north here. So this is trying to close off with that new convective burst. And we kind of notice that, again, most of your strong winds are going to be on the south and northeastern side here. Over about 80 knots or so off in the south and northeastern quadrants here. And we know that the ship's analyzed shear is only 1 knot. So you're not really getting a lot of shear. It's just dry air intrusions that are really stopping this from intensifying at a more quick and earnest pace. If we look at the track forecast, this is the 5 p.m. advisory here. We notice that this is nearing Category 3 intensity. Winds right now estimated to be about 100 miles an hour, 100 to 105. And we notice that, again, this is expected to become a major hurricane sometime tonight as it crosses over the Cuba part here, the western tip of Cuba, moves into the southwestern or southeastern Gulf of Mexico, rather, as a Category 4 hurricane and intensifying to 140 miles per hour within 36 hours from now. And then it makes its final approach into the Tampa Bay or southwestern or western Florida Peninsula at this point. If we look here at the advisories here from 5 p.m., we have a tropical storm watch that has been issued for the majority of the Florida Peninsula at this point, including Orlando, so Orange County, Brevard, Osceola, all the way up towards Daytona Beach, Melbourne. And then we have a hurricane watch that has been extended off towards the east to include portions of Sumter County. And so this hurricane watch now borders the Sumter Lake and Marion County lines. And we have hurricane watch further northwest of that. We have an upgraded hurricane warning now for portions of Tampa Bay and Pinellas County, and tropical storm warnings for portions of Polk County as well, and further down towards the southwest, including Hardy County as well. Now, if we look at the overall risk impact for this particular system, we have a high risk of impacts generally from about the Florida Big Bend area and Cedar Key southward towards Tampa and even further south than that. Some of the model trends today have shifted a little bit more into better agreement that even portions of southwest Florida could see some significant storm surge and rainfall impacts from this particular system. And so there is a high risk of impacts all the way down there. And the risk impact here extends all the way to about Orlando before you get inside of this significant risk. Again, most of Central Florida at this point is under that significant risk. Most of the Florida Peninsula is under that significant risk right now. If you look here at the wind gust forecast here, again, we are seeing the wind gust potential over 90 plus miles per hour now, especially across portions of the far western Florida Peninsula. The far western coast here is the one of the greatest wind threats right now. 80 mile per hour gusts could extend well inland as well. And then we see that 70 mile per hour gust here extending really again from about Cedar Key through about the southern and southwestern tip there of Lake County, moving back towards the southwest, pretty close there to Cape Coral. 60 mile per hour gusts could be expected all the way to Orlando, and then tapering off the further east, southeast, and northeast that you get away from these areas. Now, again, this is subject to change based on track, intensity, and overall just a bunch of other things. As confidence begins to increase, these numbers should either expand, go up, or go down just based on whatever we're dealing with at that time. The storm surge threat we'll get to in a minute, but the rainfall forecast is also expected to be very significant. We are expecting at least over 7 inches of rain for the entire peninsula, and then we can see the stretch here of about 10 inches of rainfall expected really from about Marion County and kind of just to the south of Jacksonville and kind of around the area here about Seminole County, Orange County, all the way down here to about Fort Myers, Cape Coral. And you could see 5 inches of rain even as far south here as portions of Miami and all the way down to Miami-Dade County. So there is a significant risk for some rain from that. The storm surge threat is also one that's going to be monitored again. This storm surge risk for the Tampa Bay area is very significant. 5 to 10 feet above normally dry ground. This is above normally dry ground. So this is not, 5 to 10 inches, of just water that is already there. We're looking at inundation of 5 to 10 feet, and that, of course, is, pretty much above most humans at the high end of that. So we're dealing with a very significant threat here for at least, the low-lying areas of, Pinellas County and even all the way through the Swanee River there, about 5 to 8 feet, all the way up there to Cedar Key, down to Boynton Beach, about 4 to 7 feet. So this whole area is going to see some very significant storm surge and the potential for some of that extreme flooding, again, especially around Tampa Bay if this makes landfall in that area, which we'll get to where it's going in a minute. But if that makes landfall in that area, that's going to be very substantial. And then we could even see storm surge over towards Indian Pass of 1 to 3 feet. And on the other side, from the Flagler-Volusia County line upwards into Georgia, we could even see some 2 to 4 feet of storm surge as well. So that's also something worth noting there. Now, how strong is the system to get? Well, the intensity forecast has been a little bit off over the past couple of days here in the last, few hours, certainly. The latest runs here of the H-Wharf did, from the 12Z run, you can kind of see where it had it this evening at about 964. So it is a little bit higher than that. Of course, not too much higher, but the winds have certainly not responded yet. And we're certainly not getting that earnest intensification like we saw a few days ago. But we notice this isn't a very favorable environment for additional intensification through the next 18 hours. This crosses over the western tip of Cuba and then moves into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. Now, this is valid for 2 p.m. tomorrow evening, and I'll be on the road by this time, but this is valid for 2 p.m. tomorrow evening, Tuesday evening, rather. And that's tomorrow, actually. So this is 2 p.m. tomorrow evening. And we're dealing with a particular storm right now that could be in the southern portion, really, of the southeastern Gulf of Mexico at this particular point. And we can see that very favorable interaction here going on with the trough, which is off towards the north here. And this will continue to intensify our storm. But one thing to monitor here, again, we have this southern jet stream, which right now is only aiding in intensification But this is going to change as our storm begins to approach. We notice that, again, the southern jet stream actually intensifies as it tries to move the geostrophic balance here from southwest to northeast, following the areas of low pressure in this jet core. And so this actually is intensifying the flow down here to over about 30 to 40 knots of shear. This rapidly actually decreases our system as it wraps around that dry air. And we notice that this does go on to decay fairly rapidly. So it goes from, category 4 to, high-end category 1 hurricane in the matter of about, a day or so. Now, this is certainly a possibility, but where this actually is positioned means all the more to how fast this weakens. If you look at some of the newest runs here of the HWRF, this is the 18Z run here, valid for 8 p.m. this evening. We noticed that the storm here, it's a little bit too strong, actually, initialized there at 960. But irregardless, this makes landfall in the western part of Cuba, moves into the southeastern Gulf, and actually kind of takes a track very, very close to Tampa Bay here, bringing hurricane conditions immediately along the coast and hurricane force gusts well inland, and then begins to kind of move this further towards the north and makes landfall kind of near Cedar Key-ish sometime then on Friday morning. So this would be a scenario in which this keeps it offshore, which means that continued onshore flow for Tampa for several days here, and then moves inland as a weakening tropical storm or hurricane at this point. But the rainfall here is going to be the big thing. You notice that the simulated radar has these rain bands wrapping around this very heavy rain. And now one thing to note here is, again, the rainfall over the peninsula is going to depend a lot on where the dry air slot actually wraps around. If we look at the relative humidity here off the HWRF, it actually tries to have this dry air band wrap around into the peninsula, which would hopefully then at least, quiet down the flooding rainfall threat, but only would maybe help to increase the tornado potential with that dry air aloft. That might actually help to increase instability and increase the tornado threat across the peninsula with any storms that do manage to survive. And then, of course, that northwestern side here is going to be the kind of most intense here, that northern and northwestern side, as the shear begins to work on the system. And then really by Friday, most of the peninsula, especially south and central, is done with the heavy rainfall threat. But on the HMON forecast, this is a little bit different here. This is the HMON. This is very close to what the initialized or the actual pressures were based on recon. And we notice again this crosses over and is way further north and east, and actually follows a similar trajectory closer to the icon forecast from earlier. And this would bring it in near category 4 intensity, albeit weakening, but still category 4 intensity is nothing to shy away from. So this would be making landfall near category 4 intensity, near and just south of Tampa Bay, probably near the Sarasota-Bradenton area. Bringing hurricane conditions well inland, continuing hurricane force winds well inland, and then making its way back out to the open waters here sometime on Thursday after crossing the entire peninsula. So on this particular run here, you notice that these rain bands have more time to work inland before that dry slot goes. And again, on that northern side here, as that shear begins to increase, you're looking at a very significant rainfall, flooding potential here if this were to verify. And I'm saying if because that's, again, a little bit of an uncertainty. We'll see what some of the overnight guidance does here. Again, it might shift back east a little bit, or it might shift west. Again, your best bet right now is to hope for a shift west, but certainly the trends today have been further east. And certainly this is going to matter in terms of the storm surge, but also for what intensity it is, because we notice that the HMON has it at a higher intensity because the shear is unable to significantly weaken this system before landfall. And so this is making landfall as a near category 4 hurricane just south of Tampa. So this is virtually, almost as bad as you can get for this area. And this would certainly be a very catastrophic event. This is no joke. If you're in an evacuation zone and told to evacuate, please do. Elsewise, please continue to prepare for a major hurricane landfall. This is no joke. This is for real. And this is a very serious situation unfolding right in front of our eyes, unfortunately. Hope for the best, but hope is not a preparedness tool. So you need to be prepared right now. And this is not a joke. This is no hype or anything like that. This is a very serious situation on our hands. Now, my plans again, just to kind of look at it here, this is the sunset this evening out of Winter Garden, Florida. But again, right now, what we're planning to do is we are planning to chase our system, Ian. We plan to chase it and see what we can get. Again, we're probably going to leave sometime early tomorrow afternoon to try to get ahead of this, start setting up things. And of course, this will be live streamed as long as the cell networks really are able to hold it. So we'll see how that ends up going. But, if you want to follow along, make sure to subscribe and, just make sure to, support the channel any way you can. Share this to friends and family. Certainly get the message out. Help spread the word. All right. So that being said, I hope you have a good rest of your evening. Of course, I am Mike O'Malley. I'll be talking to you guys again some more tomorrow.